Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining me for another episode of the Horses Advocate podcast. I'm your host, Geoff Tucker. I'm a veterinarian. I'm not your veterinarian, as I say, but I am a veterinarian who's been dedicating his life for 40 years, 41 years to the teeth of horses. And while I practiced general practice for a dozen years, during those 41 years, the rest of it since 1998 has been just teeth. And I've noticed this new disease called equine odontoclastic tooth resorption and hypercementosis. And we all call it EOTRH. Yes, it took me a week of just memorizing that, and I don't expect you to remember it. But what I used to call it was ugly teeth of old horses. And it's really easy to identify. You just lift the lips of your horse and look at the incisors, which are the teeth right behind the lips, what a lot of people call the nippers, and they don't look right. So just to give you an idea of what it looks like, and bear with me, because this whole podcast is about EOTRH, but more importantly, it's about an article. And I'm going to share the screen here. And this article is from a magazine called Equine, and the title of the article is Disease du Jour, EOTRH. It follows with, in this episode, Dr. Emily McAndrews discusses equine odontoclastic tooth resorption, hypercementosis. This is in the April 18th, 2024 issue, and they have pictures, and apparently it's a podcast you can listen to. And I want to go over this magazine in this relatively short podcast I'm going to give you a balanced view of what's going on here. So if you look at EOTRH, all you have to do is go to thehorsesadvocate.com and press or put in the search EOTRH, and you're going to find all this. I've done a podcast, let's see, number 90, where was it? It's like 91 or 92. So I did one back then, and I did another podcast on it where I'm going too fast. Number 107. So number 92 and 107, I've talked about this, and I think I've talked about it relatively recently in another podcast. But I want to show you, for those of you who are watching this on YouTube, the incisors with the EOTRH. I have so many pictures of EOTRH that there's like 187 of them here. And you can see all these red dots and the swelling, the enlargement of the root of the tooth, the receding gum line, dental tartar on the incisors. This is classic EOTRH, but it gets worse. And you'll see in a couple of these, those are some teeth I took out of an older horse. As I scoot through here, you can see the enlargement of the tooth root as his tooth is desperately trying to hold on to its attachment in the skull. And I've been saying for the longest time, here you can see that the gum is receded. You can almost see the whole tooth root. I've been saying for the longest time that the disease is of the bone that the teeth are in, with subsequent decay of the tooth. And according to several sources that are now coming out, they're saying it's a disease of the tooth with secondary disease of the bones. And I find that fascinating. Here I'm just scrolling through a bunch of these. I don't want to go through any more because that's just, especially for you guys who are listening to me, it's hard for you to see these. So I'm going to go back to the magazine article and talk about EOTRH. Now, I'm a little upset. I'm upset because we as veterinarians are supposed to be scientists, and we're supposed to be doing the right thing for the horse. And I don't believe tooth extraction for the horse is correct. And they argue that the horse is showing pain, and by removing the teeth, the horse no longer has pain. And I can understand that. there are horses that become painful due to inflammation and infection of the gums of the teeth. And maybe tooth extraction is the way to go. But in multiple places in this article and in other articles, everyone is saying basically that they don't know what is the root cause, what is causing this problem. And I'm old enough to remember back in the 70s, we never saw this. Back in the 80s, when I went to vet school, there were no textbook pictures of equine odontoclastic tooth resorption and hypercementosis. And if you were watching this on YouTube, you just saw me scroll through a bunch of pictures, some of 187 that I've got on there, of just the incisors that are showing this disease. And all you have to do is lift the lips and see, oh my gosh, these teeth look ugly. And you can tap them with your finger and they're like, no, don't do that. It hurts. Or they can't bite a carrot anymore. But I've never seen the demise of the horse brought on by this. I'll get back to that point. So if you're a veterinarian listening to this and you want to argue this case, I get it. I get it. But you have to come back to the 70s and the 80s and ask yourself one question. If this is so prevalent, why didn't we see it with our own eyeballs back in those days, those decades? It's a new disease, and we still don't know the cause. But the cause has come about since 1980. And that's my premise. We have to start from there and try and figure out what the root cause is. And in my on my website, thehorsesadvocate.com, you can find my article which states what is the cause of EOTRH in horses. And my belief is that it's nutritional, causing a leaky gut syndrome, and the toxins, listen to me, toxins, the inflammatory ingredients that are found in commercial feeds are damaging the gums, the underlying bone, the teeth of the incisors and the canines of horses, and possibly the first cheek tooth, and maybe all the way further back. I don't see why not. And they're starting to see evidence of EOTRH in the cheek teeth, although it never shows clinically, but they can find it radiographically. So what's going on here? What is the cause behind it? So this is an interview with Dr. McAndrews, who's a diplomat of the American Veterinary Dental College with specifically in equines. So they have small animal and then they have horses. It's a relatively new college of diplomacy in the veterinary field that was started by many of my colleagues who believed that they needed a stronger voice because they were identifying more and more details about the teeth of horses through electron microscopy, through proper post-mortem analysis, and through a lot of data that they were collecting. They got some information. But I don't think they've gotten correct data. I don't think they've looked at the horse itself and given us enough information to help horse owners stop dental disease. I'll give you a great example. This is in humans. And I got this out of Dr. Gundry's book, and I believe that he has, done his research. But he said back in 1932, in the town of Brooklyn, which is outside of New York City, they were having a high incidence of dental caries, which are cavities in children. And they didn't understand why. So investigations were done, and they found that there was a root cause of these children eating oatmeal. Now, we know oatmeal is heart healthy and it's supposed to be good for us. But in this case, they found that it was doing something to the teeth. And once they removed oatmeal, cavities went away. Now, fast forward to 1990s, I'm sitting in the dentist chair and he says, Doc, if you want to stop having cavities, stop eating sugar. It's that simple. And I'm like, oh, well, we can't stop eating sugar, can we? I mean, this is the way we all are. We can't stop eating sugar. I love my cereal, which is sugar. I love the biscuits and the bagels and the donuts and everything else that has sugar in it. Or you guys who have sugar in your coffee. All of these sugars enter the digestive tract, which starts here at your lips, and it's going to affect the teeth. And recently, last summer, I sent in a saliva sample and had it analyzed for my gut microbiome of my mouth. And from that, I determined what microbes should be there, but are not. And I'm supplementing with something that's supposed to help the oral microbiome of my mouth. And so far, it's working pretty well, at least according to my dentist. And my dentist and I talk about the oral microbiome all the time. And you guys listening to this might have heard of the microbiome of the gut, and you think that it's just in the intestines or possibly the stomach. But microbes cover us head to tail, inside and out, in our lungs, in our air, on our head, on our skin, and in our mouth. And we're constantly in a balancing act between the good bacteria and the bad bacteria. When the bad bacteria set up shop, they will lead to decay. And I'll tell you another thing that wasn't really prevalent in the textbooks, I know because I looked for it, was cheek tooth fractures. It wasn't there. Now we see cheek tooth fractures all the time. And all my colleagues who are big into this, college of diplomacy of a college of veterinary dentistry are big to talk about finding pulp chambers that have they're too deep, that decay is starting to occur. They're talking about infection of the gum line. They throw about all these fancy diagnoses, but nobody's coming forward with, hey, why didn't we have this back in the 70s? And some people say, well, we didn't have the technology back then. All you had to do is open up the mouth and look in, a flashlight, pull the tongue to the side, look in, there's a fractured tooth. A horse can't eat, can't chew. There's a fractured tooth. And yet when I went through vet school at Cornell, they never mentioned it. So what the heck is going on? Anyway, let me keep reading here. I'm going to bounce around a little bit. She first describes what EOTRH is, and they say it is a painful and progressive condition in middle-aged older horses. Okay, right then and there, we know that youngsters don't get it. Why? Because it's a very slow onset disease. But she goes on to say how prevalent is tooth resorption in horses. Quote, in recent studies of horses 5 years and older, so these are young horses, radiographic surveys have identified a very high incidence of tooth resorption. They found that 88% of these horses that were looked at and 49% or half of the teeth that they actually radiographed had evidence of tooth resorption. That's incredible. I mean, are you kidding? But they're not showing any symptomatic signs, but they're saying, hey, it's coming on. It's kind of like you're chewing your food, not having a problem until your dentist says, oh, you know what? I think we've got a cavity there. Then they take an x-ray and say, yes, you have decay and we need to fill it. And you're like, gosh, it wasn't even bothering me. That's basically what's going on. We're getting a progressive disease that we don't know why, and we're not telling horse owners how to stop it. We're just saying, oh, there it is. We're going to have to take care of it, and I'll get into that in a second. Furthermore, they go on, the studies revealed 20% of horses and 7.6% of teeth had hypercementosis, and almost 16% of incisors in asymptomatic horses had tooth resorption at a high enough stage to warrant extraction. Well, so these horses aren't showing any signs of any tooth problems, and they're finding 16%. That's like 1 in 5, a little less than 1 in 5 horses are having enough resorption, tooth damage, that these colleagues of mine say, go ahead and extract the tooth. And I'm like, well, wait, stop. You're not even trying to save these teeth. So age correlated with increasing rates of tooth resorption, with horses older than 15 having a higher stage of tooth resorption on their corner incisors. Well, duh. It's a progressive disease, so it makes sense that the older horses would have it. She goes on to say the tricky part is determining when tooth resorption is getting to a level that's pathologic and causing the horse pain. Wait a minute. She just said that 16% of them have a high enough resorption rate to warrant extraction, but she's saying that's tricky. So I'm saying, hold on. So where is the cutoff? Well, she goes on to say, and I've mentioned this in another podcast, that there's certain stages, and they grade them 1 through 5. 1 is, minor, 3 is moderate, and 5 is the tooth is completely destroyed already. And I'm not too sure at what point they want to pull them out. They don't specifically say, but I think somewhere between a grade 2 and a grade 3, most of these veterinarians who are board certified in equine dentistry want to pull the tooth, even when they're asymptomatic. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding. Hold on. Why don't we find the cause and maybe stop this? Or are you saying that now that it's occurred, we need to just take them out because prevention is futile at this point? I don't know. Nobody's done any studies. They just said, oh, here it is. Let's pull them out. And it's really interesting because I think she says in here the theories. Don't get me going on the theories. This is crazy. But she does say twice in here that it's hard to determine what tooth is actually painful, therefore take them all out. And I'm like, I'm speechless. As I said in my blog, speechless in the case of tooth extraction. I'm just left speechless through this thinking process. So here are some of the reasons that they think, they meaning the equine veterinarians who are studying this, think is the cause on EOTRH. The most prevalent theory, I'm quoting here, the most prevalent theory currently is biomechanical stresses on the tooth are potentially causing the condition. Horses' incisors start getting shorter at ages 13 to 15, which causes a decreased surface area for the periodontal ligament attachment. Because there's less surface area, there's more focal stress on certain parts of the tooth, which causes a release of cytokines, which are inflammatory cells. Those cytokines release clastic cells, which triggers the tooth resorption. Classic are just cells that start to eat away tissue, osteoclasts. And I'm blown away because they're basically saying to God or whoever, the evolution or whatever you want to believe, that created our horses. They said for 55 million years, your teeth are fine. In fact, for the past 5,000 years, we've been with humans. They've been fine. Up until 1980, those incisors have been fine. But all of a sudden, they don't have good enough tooth to survive to their ripe old age of 20 to 30. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. How can anybody even put forth that kind of research to suggest that the biomechanical stresses on the tooth are potentially causing a condition? If you're looking at me, my mouth is open and nothing's coming out. I'm just like lost for words. How can evolution make perfect teeth and in the last 40 years destroy them? It just doesn't make sense. They go on to say, once tooth resorption starts, the horse will experience concurrent periodontal disease. This leads into another theory that bacterial infections could potentially cause EOTRH. Wait, whoa, stop. They're saying EOTRH is the tooth resorption. And then they say that the next theory says the bacterial infection could cause EOTRH. So which is it? There's no doubt that bacteria get in there. Why? Because the tooth is not getting blood supply. It's dying. And as the tooth dies, bacteria will start to grow. But there are other reasons for bacteria to grow. And it's not because you're not brushing their teeth. It could be because you're feeding a lot of grains with byproducts that are inflammatory and sugars, high in sugars. And you're changing the microbiome. So now advantageous bacteria that shouldn't belong in the mouth are now starting to grow. And they take advantage of this diseased tissue, so it's a secondary infection. This is what I believe is happening with gum disease in horses' mouths. But nobody wants to look at this. They're just assuming that all horses should be fed grain, period. And then they say, oh, look at all these tooth issues that we're having. No, they weren't in the textbooks in the 1980s, but that doesn't matter. It's because of there's biomechanical changes going on. Come on, give me a break. They go on to say, others speculate that iatrogenic dental procedures. Iatrogenic means it's been caused by the practitioner who's working in the mouth, making changes, like overfloating. Well, why are we overfloating? I mean, I don't even understand that. I've been floating teeth for a long time. I don't float the incisors, never have, nor will I ever float the incisors. And I've told people this a million times. It's on my website, so you can understand why I don't believe in incisor reductions. Simply put, the enamel of the tooth is wearing down from the movement of the jaw and the tongue. And if you improve the movement of the jaw and the tongue by removing causes of pain, that movement will alleviate abnormal wear of the teeth. But they're going to keep chewing. And in fact, the reason why the incisors wear down is not because the nippers bite each other. They don't close down and rub against each other. It's the tongue going in and out, in and out, in and out with every mouthful of food that they take in. That's what's wearing down the teeth. If you're listening to this, be honest. Are your teeth clenched together? No, mine aren't while I'm talking to you. They stay apart. It's a relaxed space. Most horses have a relaxed space until they start chewing. And I guarantee you, if you put a wad of food between your cheek teeth and start chewing it like a piece of meat or a big vegetable, if you're not a meat eater or whatever, you got a bolus of salad back there, it makes no difference. Are your front teeth coming together? No. The only time your front teeth come together are when you're biting an apple or biting something and you're trying to tear it off. Then you move it back and the back teeth are chewing. The front teeth hardly ever come together. They just don't, unless you're just ornery and mean and clench your teeth all the time. All right. The long and short of it, she says, unfortunately, is we don't know. And without knowing what causes it, it's harder for us to stop the disease process because we don't know exactly what we're trying to stop other than tooth resorption, hypercementosis. So they go on to say clinical signs may take years to develop. Veterinarians usually don't diagnose it until the horse is in the latter stages of the disease, when it starts to affect the crowns of the teeth. Crowns are the exposed part of the tooth. She said clinical signs can be subtle, even if the horse has significant radiographic changes, and it can be difficult to correlate radiographic changes with pain. That's because the tooth is dying, and as it dies, it doesn't have any pain, but the pain is coming from the inflammation of the gums around there. It's not the tooth. Extracting the tooth is just basically creating a huge hole that all the bacteria can come out, and it'll fill in with granulation tissue, and the pain goes away. Okay, this is interesting. Common clinical signs can include gingivitis or inflamed gums, periodontitis, which is, again, inflammation of the area surrounding the tooth, small pits in the teeth calculus, and a bulbous appearance of the incisors from hypercementosis. Okay, big words. Take a look at the pictures. You can see them. You'll figure it out. Oh, this isn't normal. She goes on to say, if the disease is advanced enough, it can progress to fracture, tooth mobility, and periodontal pockets. Yes, I've seen them fractured teeth. I've seen abscesses come out of the middle of the tooth. I've seen a lot of this stuff. Horses can be sensitive to the speculum and non-compliant for oral exams. I call this the carrot test. If your horse can bite a carrot that's about 1 inch thick and snap it off with his front teeth, he's fine. But if he's trying to bite it and he doesn't want to, probably got some pain going on. They might display weight loss. Oh my gosh, you know how many causes there are for weight loss? I mean, teeth are probably the last thing. If the horse is eating all the food that you're putting into him, then it's probably not the teeth that's causing weight loss. It could be excess grain that you're feeding. It could be not enough food that you're feeding. Could be increased exercise and decreased amounts of food going in. It could be parasites, overloaded parasites. It could be other disease processes. But weight loss is not, big word here, pathognomonic, or meaning it is closely associated with EOTRH. It's not. It's very loosely, if at all. Quitting, which is balling up pain, spitting it out. Haven't seen it. Just haven't seen it. Quitting is when the cheek teeth are having problems creating a bolus of food and they spit it out. So if they're quitting, look at the cheek teeth. There's something going on back there. It's not the incisors. Halitosis. Halitosis is bad breath, and bad breath can come from multiple causes. I've listed 5 different breath problems in a horse. One is food is packed in there, so it starts to ferment. Another, there's a bacterial infection, so it stinks. You got decay, that stinks. You got an anaerobe growing in there that smells so sweet, and that's like an abscess. And then, of course, capophagy, where they're actually eating their own manure. That's a very unique smell. And of course, you have the old man breath, the stale smell. And that's a horse whose tongue isn't able to get around and clean the mouth because the teeth are too sharp. Has nothing to do with the incisors, with one exception. And I showed you some pictures on here earlier. If you're just listening to this, you've got to go to thehorseadvocate.com, type in EOTRH in the search, and look for incisors and EOTRH, and you see all the pictures. But there's one where he had a wad of grass stuck between the upper lip and the upper teeth because the horse doesn't want to get the tongue out there and clean that because it does hurt. So yes, horses can get pain from these things. And of course, bitting problems. Well, bitting problems is you jamming the bit and banging the front teeth, and that hurts. But if your horse opens his mouth and takes a bit in, and then if you're on the horse and he's having bitting problems, look further back. You've got some sharp edges back there. Some horses rub their incisors on the wall. Again, not pathognomonic for EOTRH. Others have essentially no clinical signs. And she says, likely because they have learned to live with the discomfort because of its gradual onset. Okay, there's no argument there. That's possible. Or the teeth are just dead, or they have a high threshold of pain. I don't know. Doesn't matter. If they're not painful, why are we yanking the teeth out? So they want to go on treatment. Where is it? They had treatment for this. Oh, treating EOTRH, right there. They've tried all kinds of treatments, they say, from toothbrushing to steroids to antimicrobials to splinting the teeth. These have all been unsuccessful for long-term management because veterinarians still don't know what causes the disease. They don't know how to stop the disease process. That leaves tooth extraction as the most effective option. I have put out 4 years ago, give or take, a whole article that if you Google, pardon me, if you do a search on any search browser, Google, DuckDuckGo, I don't care what you use. Actually, I do, but for EOTRH, you will find my article that says, what is the cause of EOTRH? And I put forth that according to Dr. Patty Dixon, who has done more research on teeth of horses and was invited to speak to the American Association of Equine Practitioners as the key presenter, meaning no other lectures were given. Everybody's supposed to go and watch this invited guest, of which I was embarrassed. Hardly anybody showed up because it was about teeth and the evolution of the horse. How wrong was that? But I'll try to stay away from that. You know, I'm a little upset. But he was brilliant. And at the very end of the second lecture, which was held later just for people who are interested in dentistry, he said, if you had to put me in the corner, I would say that EOTRH is an autoimmune disease. And I said, that's brilliant. Now, that's the chief #1 guy in the universe who's been studying teeth of horses. And he thought it was an autoimmune disease. Where is that in this article? Where does it say, hey, it could be an autoimmune disease? Well, they can't say that. Why? Because at the root cause of most autoimmune diseases is some sort of inflammatory food. It's behind lupus, Crohn's, Hashimoto's, rheumatoid arthritis, and other inflammatory autoimmune diseases of humans. They found dietary causes, and removing some of those causes can relieve symptoms. Great example, removing seed oils removes most joint pain. All right. And they're finding these lectins, these proteins that are in the outer shells of grains, to be inciting causes of many of these deals. Jordan Peterson's daughter, Michaela Peterson, had awful, awful diseases that once she went carnivore and got rid of everything else, all those diseases disappeared. You can look her up online. Amazing story. And story after story of humans who have identified autoimmune diseases and remove the cause, their autoimmune disease subsides. So if it's an autoimmune disease in horses, why aren't we looking for the cause of that? Why aren't we removing that? Well, basically because, surprise here, veterinarians and veterinary medicine are being supported by grain companies. It's just that simple. Now, I'm just one lone guy here. And I'm saying that these huge companies, multi-billion-dollar companies, whether it's Purina, Nutrina, Cargill, Mars, all of these companies, they make a living by making grains. So do the great farmers of our country. They produce the corn, the canola, and the rice, and the soybeans, and the hays that we have. They work their tails off to produce a product to keep our animals alive and feed humans. But it's not working in horses. It is so evident that we didn't have most of these diseases that we're seeing today. They just weren't there in the 70s or 80s. Look at any textbook that was printed back then. Look for these diseases. If they were there, they were rare. And if you go back to mid-1800s or earlier, when feeding grain was pretty rare and finding hay was pretty rare, you're not going to find a lot of diseases. I mean, they were still there, to some degree, but not like it is now. Here it is. What did they say? 88% of horses 5 years and older. Yep, 88% had evidence of EOTRH. That just blows my mind. But there's more room for explosions here, so hang on. So when they talk about treating EOTRH, they think the only deal is to extract the teeth. Now, I know that since long before I started pontificating here about EOTRH, there was people feeding shredded mushrooms. And while Dr. Dixon was there in the small room with about, 80 of us, hard to count, somebody said, hey, what about shredded mushrooms for EOTRH? And everybody in the room, including Dr. Dixon and the other people on the panel, just started chuckling. Well, yeah, this is a pretty serious disease, and I don't think shredded mushrooms is going to help. They didn't do it just once. They did it 3 times. When somebody said, well, what about mushrooms? People are using mushrooms and it's working. What about it? And they all laughed. So I said, well, in humans, they have found that shredded mushrooms or certain mushrooms can bind to these lectins of grain seeds, seed covers. And once bound, will eliminate them out the gut, so autoimmune diseases can be reduced with mushrooms. Now, I'm like, hey, I've got an open mind here. I got to figure out what's going on here. So I started to prescribe shredded mushrooms to horses with EOTRH. And every one of them have said the inflammation stopped. Now, the tooth never goes back to normal. It just hasn't happened. It won't happen, but it doesn't advance. I had one lady who said, yeah, I started using it, and now the horse is running around the field, has got a new lease on life, just absolutely seems happier. So it took care of the pain. It helped seal up some of the inflammation that was going on. But that one was an interesting case because I told her that if it's truly an autoimmune disease, you should be taking away all grains and grain byproducts, which includes wheat middlings, rice hulls, oat hulls, soybean hulls, any hulls, sugar beet hulls. All of it should be just removed. Eliminate. Get down to what a horse was meant to eat, which is ground plants that are growing grasses, basically, not seeds. And she wouldn't. She said, absolutely, I will not take my horse off grain. And she's honestly a type 1 diabetic, and she believes she understands everything about nutrition and sugars and everything. Nice gal, but was closed-minded. And she said, I'll try the shredded mushrooms. And she was astounded. It was beautiful. And then for reasons of me leaving that area, she continued to get dentistry from another thing. All of a sudden, I get a picture from her with a horse in the stocks, blood pouring out everywhere. And she said, I just had all the teeth removed. And the dentist said these should have been removed a while ago. Well, of course, the teeth were horrific looking. The pictures of the teeth are in the website, and you should take a look. But she kept feeding the inciting cause. So if you're going to do that, shredded mushrooms probably isn't going to work. You have to remove the cause. And everybody who's done that has horses' teeth that are doing fine. So in here, no, it wasn't here. It was someplace. Oh, where was it? I mentioned in another podcast. Somebody said that they're a colleague from the Veterinary College of Equine Dentistry, or dentistry/equine, looked at a bunch of horses that are basically wild. And he was able to radiograph them, and not one of them had EOTRH resorption. Not one. That's not mentioned in this article. But those are horses that have nothing but ground plants. They're quote unquote wild horses. But here she mentions a recent study conducted by a fellow named Dr. Rainbow, a veterinarian, who sent a survey to owners whose horses had undergone this procedure, meaning tooth extraction for EOTRH. The owners reported their horses showed improvements in body condition, dropping hay, speed of eating, general behavior, resistance to bridling, and head shaking. Overall, the owner said their horses seemed happier and had an improved quality and length of life. More than 90% of respondents said they would have done the procedure again and would do the procedure on another horse in the future. Well, you know my views of science and studies. Here is a person who went to his clients in his practice and said, okay, what do you think? Let's do a follow-up. These are the things I'm looking for. And these people gave him an answer. So more than 90% of respondents. Well, how many responded? How many did he do the procedure on? How many were sent a questionnaire, and how many of those responded? Well, let's just say there are 100 that he's done, and he got 10 back because the other were so fed up. I don't know, I'm just guessing because there's not enough information for me to, so I'm laying out what could happen. So let's say he sent out 100 questionnaires, 10 responded. Of those, 9 said, hey, this is great. One of them said, I would never do this again. I think this is the worst thing that ever happened. So 90% of respondents said that they would do it. Of the respondents, of the people who responded, how many got the questionnaire? What is the true assessment? Are there people who love watching their horse stick their tongue out because the teeth don't hold the tongue back? They sit there. If you're watching this on YouTube, you're going to see me stick my tongue out. That's what happens. There's no teeth to hold it back. So the horse keeps his tongue out. Does it hurt the horse? No, they bring it in, lick it. It's fine. But it looks super, super goofy. And if your horse is still competing, it's going out there with its tongue flapping around, which can't be done in certain sports. So this whole paragraph here, to me, is so bogus and doesn't give us the information we're looking for. Where's the scientific evidence that goes out there and looks at all horses that were done? Every single one of them. And every single one of them had an accurate follow-up with an assessment by a veterinarian who asked objective questions. But these are not so objective. They say the body condition improved. Well, maybe they got some nutritional counseling while they were there. How do we know? I mean, if they were eating everything they were given before, why is there some improved body condition? Dropping hay. Well, when you did it, it was winter and they had bad hay. And when you asked for a response, they were, oh, yeah, the horse is eating everything. Just, it doesn't spit the hay out, but it's like August and it's fresh hay and it looks really good. I don't know. Speed of eating. It could be, I don't know. There are just so many variables here. It just blows my mind. So the diplomats of the American Veterinary Dental College, board certified. I'm still sitting here talking to you guys, but that's what this podcast is all about. You as horse owners are going to get information from what you feel are trusted sources. And you need to have somebody guide you through that jungle and say, okay, well, what about this? And what about that? And does that make sense? And why aren't they asking these questions? And why is this avoided? And why is this presented to you this way? That's my job. Listen, if you're a big grain company, don't come after me. Come on. You know, the number of horses in America is decreasing. You know, it's a losing proposition for all of you anyway. You're just spinning the plate. Your big game is all the food producing animals and the humans, and you're producing all the grain for them. We're just a drop in the bucket. We're basically nothing to you guys. And you're basically getting piles and piles and piles of byproducts you can't get rid of. You can't throw them in the lake or in the ocean. You can't burn them and you can't bury them. So when you take the hulls off your wheat and off your rice to give us the foods the humans want, white flour, white rice, and you're taking the outer hulls off, you're taking the sugar beets, pressing out all the sugar, feeding the sugar to us, and have this pile of beet pulp left over, you're going to get rid of it through our horses. I mean, I would too, if I were trying to, you know, figure out what to do with this stuff. But it's not helping our horses. It's an experiment you guys tried, and it's not working. No different than margarine was supposed to be the best thing until they found out that trans fats are horrible for us. Now nobody has margarine. Now they figured it out. We tried all sorts of things, low-fat diets. We figured out that doesn't work. Now everyone's trying to do low-carb diets, and they're figuring out if they just do a zero-carb diet, they'll be fine. That's not going to work either. Horses were meant to eat ground plants. They didn't have problems with their incisors. They evolved over the millions of years of evolution to be just fine. Cattle and all other ruminants, bison, antelope, deer, goats, sheep, they evolved not to have any upper incisors, and they're harvesting food just fine. These horses are out there harvesting food with their front teeth. Their front teeth are basically weapons to attack you. And yes, taking the teeth out, the horse is going to harvest food just fine. I have 3 or 4 videos on my website. If you look for chewing or harvesting, search for those terms, you'll see these videos of one horse that doesn't have a lower mandible at all. It's been cut off due to cancer. You'll see horrible parrot mouth and monkey mouth where the front teeth don't even come into, they don't meet, they don't come into occlusion. and horses that are missing their upper teeth from cribbing or have had them extracted. All these horses can harvest grass just fine, so don't worry about that. If your vet wants to take the teeth out and you're say, okay, fine. You know, adverse reactions, they said, is mostly from drugging the horse. That's what it said in the article. Well, the teeth are diseased, and taking the teeth out basically takes a splinter out of the wound so the splinter can heal. It's the same idea. But we got to find the cause, folks. But there's no money in it. Who's going to put up the money to do the research to find out what it is? But if you're worried about it and you want to go grain-free, I mean, that would be a really easy thing to do. A horse comes into a clinic, they take a radiograph, they say, oh, we don't have any signs of EOTRH on here. What are you feeding the horse? Oh, he just has pasture. Okay, click it, put it in the boxes. That's one. Look around. Oh, here's a horse with EOTRH. What are you feeding him? Oh, he gets 5 pounds of grain twice a day. Click it, put it in the boxes. After a while, we're going to get some information. It's not going to cost that much, guys. I see EOTRH all the time. And I'm tired of asking people, hey, do you feed grain? And even if they don't feed grain, a lot of people say, yeah, I don't feed grain, but I've only had the horse 2 years and he's 17 years old. What happened in the first 15 years? We don't know. We don't know. There's too many open-ended questions. So thank you for, going through this with me. I thought it was going to be short, but it's not. And I appreciate your time here. Way too many questions. This got under my skin. It just came in. I found it today, and I was so lucky that I was going to record a podcast, and this just moved right up to the top. So thanks for your time. And please go to YouTube and hit the subscribe button. I think I asked you to after this. It's really important. But more important than that, I think, is to tell other people about this podcast and be the leader. Say, look, we don't know everything, but there's a guy out here who's looking at it from a different point of view. And until you look at all the points of view, it may not be right. I may not be right. They may not be right. But you have to start opening up the dialogue and say, okay, what about this? What about that? We have to start looking at all the different problems or possibilities. So it's not pie in the sky. It really isn't. It's just common sense. All right. Thanks again for joining me here. And I look forward to speaking with you another time. Bye. Hey, everyone. Doc T here. Thank you for listening to my content. Would you do me a huge favor? Would you please subscribe, comment, like, thumbs up, and give a star review? However it's presented to you, I want you to do that. There's two reasons. The first, of course, is to improve this product. This way I know what you like, what you don't like, what I can improve upon, what topics you want me to cover. But more importantly, it's also going to help others find me. And by doing that, you are now engaged in this mission of helping horses thrive in a human world. By you helping, we can reach others. And that I would be so grateful for. And remember, go to thehorsesadvocate.com for updates on this information. Thehorsesadvocate.com. And again, thank you so much for being here. Doc T out.